Still recording. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our CLOCS-A Q&A with CLOCS in the UK. How's that for a bit of a rhyme? My name's Jerome Karslak. I'm the chair of the steering group for CLOCS-A initiative, and joining me is Michael Holmes. He's the deputy chair of CLOCS-A as well. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Jerome.
So what we'll do, Andy, is I'll just pass over to you, mate. You do a bit of an introduction for yourself, and then we're going to dive into a bit of a Q&A at the end, and we have a number of people who are going to be throwing questions in, and we have a list for you as well. So thank you so much for your generosity and kicking off and giving some insights into how CLOCS works in the UK. Over to you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to come along and talk today. So really today was just to give everybody a bit of an update, a bit of a background on where CLOCS is in the UK, the journey we've been on, where we kind of are today and where we are moving forward. I've prepared a bit of a presentation. It should take me about 15 minutes, I think 20 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. But firstly, introduction to myself, Andy Brooke, CLOCS Programme Director. I've been with CLOCS in the UK for nearly 14 months now, but I worked with CLOCS previously in a different organisation. They consider it a constructor scheme, because we provided the monitoring resources for CLOCS. So we were the people who sent the boys and girls out onto the projects to actually assess the projects against the CLOCS standards. So I've known CLOCS for about 5 or 6 years and took the opportunity last year to jump across to lead CLOCS development in the UK. So let me just share a screen if I can, Jerome. It should be relatively straightforward, I think. Just looking for a thumbs up from somebody that you can see that. Excellent.
Good to go. Looks fantastic.
Excellent. Excellent. Right. So what is CLOCS UK? And I'll kind of start off here, which might be a bit of an obvious point, but I don't yet quite fully understand where CLOCS Australia is in its development. I don't know if you've got down to detail defining standards or what have you. So I'll start with the easy stuff. So CLOCS UK, a national standard developed by the industry for the industry to facilitate, support and drive the development of safer, leaner and cleaner construction logistics. And an important point in there, when we talk about things like getting buy-in, getting consensus, working collaboratively, is that by the industry for the industry. CLOCS as a standard was developed by people who do it, by regulators, by contractors, by fleet operators, not people like me sitting in an office somewhere who hasn't worked in a construction site. So very much and very important to get buy-in and to make sure it stays relevant and appropriate is to have something that is owned by the industry, developed by the industry and driven forward by the industry. So why does CLOCS exist? It exists to reduce risk to vulnerable road users, which is kind of why it exists, why it was born in 2012, 2013, on the back of a spate of cycling fatalities in East London connected very directly to the Olympic Park work that had gone on over the previous years. So a lot of construction traffic on the roads, a spike in fatalities, cycling fatalities, and TfL, Transport for London, commissioned this research to find out what was wrong. And that I won't go into the details, it's not an overly interesting report, but it born CLOCS with a very much focus on cycle safety. So it was construction logistics and cycling safety. That changed into community safety a few years later when it was realized that it wasn't just cyclists who were vulnerable, it was pedestrians, it was motorcyclists, it could be horse riders, it could be wheelchair users, anybody sharing the roads with traffic. So very much a safety focus. However, equally alongside that, there was a drive to improve efficiencies through effective planning, alternative solutions, quicker turnaround of vehicles on projects, improved air quality through reduced emissions, and ultimately trying to improve public confidence in getting back on the roads by cycling themselves and not being quite so fearful of construction traffic. So there are 4 primary aims. It was identified, one of the key parts identified in this report was the need for a consistent approach. There were standards, different standards across the UK, different standards within London that were confusing to operators as you move from borough to borough, or confusing for contractors who worked in a project there and then moved across to a project, having to change internal process, internal systems. So very much a drive for consistent approach and critically a need to collaborate. It was identified that road safety was not a problem that belonged to any one party. It wasn't an operator problem. It wasn't a contractor problem. It was a problem that belonged to them all and critically needed them all to work together to solve. the analogy we use is you could have the best fleet operator with the latest wagon, with the best safety equipment, with the best trained driver, who's had a good night's sleep, who knows where he's going. If you put that wagon past a school at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're asking for a problem. So there's that immediate need for collaboration between operator and contractor to look at route planning, to look at timings, to work with local authorities to understand what roads are available. So that collaboration was one of the key things that this report identified, that it was a disjointed industry that wasn't talking to each other. So how do we do it? We have a CLOCS standard, and that standard, as I say, developed by the industry for the industry, identifies those 4 key stakeholders. And that's been a critical point. And that was done at the outset to identify who are the parties. So we have regulators, and by regulators, we mean people who give planning permission. So local authorities, London boroughs, local councils, what have you. So we have regulators, we have clients and developers, who actually pay, the people whose money is being spent. That could be public sector, could be private sector. We have contractors, the teams who go out there and actually build the project, and we have fleet operators, the companies whose wagons are actually on the road. So we have those 4 key stakeholders, and the standard has a set of requirements that apply to each of those groups individually, but there are common threads that run throughout that tie them together. So for regulators, and I won't go through the next 4 slides in detail because there's a lot of words in them, but I just want to sort of show that they existed. So we have regulators have a set of requirements. And one of the things I will pull out there in the second bullet point is the need to have a construction logistics plan, and that has to come from the regulator. So they should be demanding the development of a construction logistics plan from the developer, from the client, from the contractor, and should be auditing that and making sure it exists and remains live throughout the project. That's a critical point for us. And when we talk to regulators and to clients selling CLOCS, try and get people to become part of CLOCS, what we often say to them is if you take one thing away from this meeting, if you don't want to sign up to CLOCS, that's all right. If you take one thing away from this, start using CLPs. We've got a template on the website, it's free to download, take it, use it, because that will solve a lot of your problems. So client requirements, talked about procuring to the CLOCS standards. So there'll be something in the procurement paperwork, tender documentation, mandating the application of CLOCS and compliance to CLOCS. And again, in that second bullet point, you can see this thread of CLPs exists there as well. As we move into principal contractors, again, second bullet point, developing a CLP. So we talk about CLP being that point of collaboration that draws all the parties together. And if you look at those 3 slides, I'll just click back quickly, you can see there's a few requirements for regulators, a few requirements for clients, but quite a few for the contractors. And that puts a lot of emphasis on the people running the project, the people who are responsible for that footprint or that highway or whatever it is, as having the most requirements. We're looking at things like access and egress, we're looking at gate checks, we're looking at site access traffic marshals. So although it is very much collaboration, there is an onus on the contractor to perhaps do the most. The requirements for fleet operators within CLOCS are relatively straightforward. We ask them to work to the standard as described as silver in the FORS standard. Now, I don't know if FORS is known about over there. I'm seeing a slight nod from Michael, I don't know. So FORS is the Fleet Operator Recognition Scheme. It is like CLOCS owned by TfL, like CLOCS born in London, and like CLOCS looking to become a national standard, very much aimed at fleet operators. And you become a FORS member, you can be FORS bronze, FORS silver, FORS gold. In the CLOCS standard, historically, we had different requirements for operators. So effectively, we were another operator standard, and the operator community said that we don't need another operator standard. The whole point of CLOCS was to create that consistency. We've got FORS, it works. So about 3 or 4 years ago, CLOCS decided to align itself with FORS. But rather than saying you have to be FORS silver, we say you have to be at the standard as described by FORS silver, just to leave that door open a little bit for operators to say that we've chosen a different route, we've chosen a different accreditation. We can demonstrate that it's equivalent or in line with FORS silver. So we talk about the standard as described as silver rather than silver itself. So we've mentioned construction logistics plans a few times, and we talk about construction logistics plans being the golden thread that run through CLOCS, and that's very deliberate. You've seen quickly there throughout the standard the reference to CLPs throughout it, but it is something that drives collaboration, it drives adoption of the necessary standards, because by using the CLP template, it forces you to consider things. It doesn't force you to do things, it forces you to consider things, and within that plan to go, well, we've considered planned measures, we considered the use of rivers or rail or cargo bikes or something. We've decided not to do them for reasons X, Y, and Z. So it forces that consideration. It forces things like route planning and vehicle calculations on movements and what have you, which, as I say, is why we say to people, if you do nothing else, adopt CLPs. Take it off our website free of charge, go and do it. So construction logistics plan is critical for us. We offer and have on the website, and this is you guys can access as well. We have guidance notes that have been developed. We have template plans. We have example plans. We have case studies, all available on the website. We talk about, I say, planned measures is the terminology we use for looking at ways of reducing vehicle journeys. Reducing impact is a bit of a cliche, but the safest vehicle journey is the one that doesn't happen. So if you can use consolidation centers, if you can use river, of course they bring in slightly different issues and challenges, but again, this is about not being overly prescriptive to people. It's suggesting people look and consider these other things and decide whether it's appropriate. One of our biggest champions at the moment is Thames Tideway, by definition, on the river, on the Thames, and they've adopted the use of river freight fantastically well and developing some case studies for future use across London. It talks about engaging suppliers and operators. It is that vital thing where you can develop a plan, and rather than just presenting it to operators and going, there you go, that's the route you're going to use, there should be an element of consideration or collaboration to say that this is what we think, what do you think, give us feedback, because we can change it and adapt it. Risk assessed vehicle routes, that's looking at hotspots, it's identifying schools, hospitals, roadworks, festivals, closed roads, what have you. If you're there for 2 or 3 years working in Notting Hill, you probably want to think about the Notting Hill Carnival, things like that. So it's looking further ahead and risk assessing vehicle routes. There's a tool available in the UK called Crash Map. I don't know if anything similar is available in Australia, but have a look at Google Crash Map. It is based on data provided by the Department for Transport, and you put in a postcode, you put in a time frame, and it tells you, lovely map with red flags, black flags, blue flags, tells you how many accidents there's been, or collisions rather, how many serious injuries and how many fatalities have been in particular areas. You can quickly see roundabouts or traffic lights where there's prevalence of accidents. You can plan your way around that. A CLP should remain live and should be reviewed and updated as the project moves through its phases. And importantly, from a regulator and client point of view, is it being complied with? Is it just words on a pretty bit of paper that's being done and then put to one side once we've got a tick in the box, or is it actually being adhered to? CLOCS offers CLP training. We do it all online now. We used to do it live. We moved online at the start of the pandemic and made the decision to keep that online now because it's been very well received. It allows anybody across the UK to tune in. It's been developed in conjunction with HS2, High Speeds 2. And ARIP. So this training, 3 levels of training, foundation, practitioner, advanced, we deliver them online monthly, and they're fantastic. Well received. We've trained about 900 people so far in the last 13, 14 months. So that's come down. And I say these resources are all available on the website. And after this, I'll make sure that Michael and Jerome have all the necessary links. So that's a quick sort of update on who we are and what we do. So where are we now? We have 340 members. 340 fee-paying members, which is important. We used to be free of charge, and we had 600 members, and we introduced a fee and lost the number, which isn't a surprise. But the drive was always to become financially self-sustaining. The TfL historically had funded us, but as we were looking to move beyond London, beyond the M25, and move across the UK, TfL understandably said, well, we don't want to fund that, we can't fund that, so you need to introduce your own revenue streams. So we introduced a fee, a small fee, £850. It was 600, put up a little bit. And we have a mix of regulators, clients, contractors and operators. And of course, and you'll understand this, some of those people work across different stakeholder types. So we've got a lot of regulators, local authorities who are also clients. They also commission their own work. We've got a number of house builders who are both client and contractor. And we've got a lot of contractors like Balfour Beatty who are contractor and operator. So they work across different groups. We've got 20 industry partners, and by partners we mean other trade bodies, government institutions, charities, Road Peace, Cycling UK, people who have an interest in CLOCS, who want to help support and promote CLOCS to their audiences and can give us access to different resources and case studies and marketing and what have you. We've been financially self-sustaining since last year. Last June was our last payment from TfL. So now we rely purely on our revenue streams of membership income, training income, and a little bit of monitoring income through the work we do with the constructor scheme to visit sites, but that's generally pennies every year. A big focus on CLOCS is around member engagement. We do a number of things to make sure that we remain by the industry, for the industry. So we have and they're probably slightly in the wrong orders. We have a working group made up of our champions. That's made of about 80, 90 of our champions. So champions are invited to be part of the working group, and we invite them because we want them to make a commitment to attend meetings, to have a voice, to respond to emails. Not all of our champions do. Some of them pay their fee. We don't see them for 12 months and off they go. But we develop a working group as a sounding board to help us drive strategy, to test resources, test ideas, to thrash out conversations and what have you. So we have a working group. We meet them 3 or 4 times a year. Again, historically live, last 2 years online. From the working group, we developed a CLOCS board, the SSGB, the Strategy, Standards and Governance Board, which has been around for 3 years now. And that was, those individuals, about 12 or 13 of them, were chosen from the working group. So again, the CLOCS champions representatives. Importantly, they are there to represent their stakeholder group, not to represent their company. So again, we've got Jacobs on there, we've got Mace on there, Balfour Beatty on there, we've got HS2, big clients, some some regulators, some local boroughs, local councils, what have you. So people nominate themselves in the working group, voted, and put these people into SSGB, and they have a rolling membership where they drop off every 2 years, and new people come on to keep it fresh. And you know, we, the CLOCS Secretariat, people who run CLOCS, report into the board, so they have the final say on changes to the standard, changes on strategy, business plans, and what have you. That keeps us honest and keeps us in the right direction and keeps us relevant and appropriate to our customers, which is hugely important. We produce various marketing materials, produce e-bulletins, newsletters that go out every month. We're starting to get a bit better on social media now. We've taken on a new marketing manager to develop a voice on LinkedIn and things like that. We run an annual conference. I'm saying we do that. We haven't done it for 3 years, but we're looking to do it again this year, where we get all of our CLOCS champions along to a venue. We get some speakers along. We usually get a few suppliers to come along and show off their latest equipment, their latest wagons. They pull it into the car park and we can wander around. And that's been a very successful day. And just bringing again this collaboration, bringing these parties together under one roof. And it's a good networking opportunity as well. So what do? We do training. We've mentioned construction logistics planning training. That's very successful, very well received. We've just launched CLOCS site access traffic marshal training, which is slightly different in as much as we don't train delegates, we train trainers. So it's a package we offer. So we say to people, if you want to deliver this training in your company to the boys and girls who man your gates across your projects, come along, we'll give you the kit, we'll give you the presentations, give you the handouts, we'll train you. So it's a mandatory training day, mandatory trainer day. And we launched that last year, and we've now done 2 sessions and trained 18 people. So again, that's been well received. The site access traffic marshal role was something that was identified quite a while ago now as being really critical, certainly as interface between where project meets operator, where the two come together, of course, when that wagon turns up at the gate and needs to be let on or not let on and managed and checked and what have you. So we developed some quite robust site access traffic marshal training. We offer support. We have a number of resources on the website. We've talked about some of them, templates, case studies, toolkits, what have you. We collaborate with the constructor scheme, who have an online best practice hub. It's free of charge. If you haven't looked at the CCS best practice hub, please do go and look at the CCS best practice hub, Google it. It's a free online resource with thousands of examples of best practice that come from the industry. So contractors and operators submit their own examples and they go online and they're voted and rated and what have you, and it's kept live and fresh. It's a fantastic resource on what other people are doing, what your peers are doing. And we've started contributing to that as well under the CLOCS name. So we've developed a presence on there. We've developed an online safety forum that we run every 6 to 8 weeks, which has proven to be hugely successful. We choose a subject, or our members choose a subject, the boards choose a subject. We get some speakers to come along and talk about. The last one was on vans, the forgotten fleet. The one before that was on vulnerable road users at the site boundary. It's deliberately launched on or delivered rather over a Thursday lunchtime, so it's a bit relaxed. People can tune in with a sandwich, cup of coffee. We get around 60 to 80 people tune into that. It's very, very positive, very low key, if that's the right way of putting it. It's supposed to be very practical. It's not strategy. It's not theory. It's here's a problem. What are people doing? What can you, when this meeting finishes, what can you go away and do? What can you implement tomorrow? Not what can you go and speak to your board about. So what next? Where are we? We're updating the CLOCS standard. That's going on now. That'll be launched in April. That's a low-key light touch review because, similar to you guys, I suppose, the industry's dealing with a pandemic, dealing with the fallout from the pandemic, and also dealing with the fallout of Brexit, which is going on over here. So we deliberately decided to do a light touch review so that, the industry has enough on its plate at the moment. It didn't need us moving the goalposts hugely. So our suggestion was a light touch review, and that's what we're putting to the board. We are developing some fleet accreditation guidance. There's still some confusion out there about this alignment with 4 Silver. So we're just talking a little bit about how that works from a procurement point of view. So if you're procuring and somebody doesn't have 4 Silver, what do you do? What does that look like? So we put together a process and some guidance. We are developing a new website, a revamped member portal where our members can log in and access resources, and we can communicate and they can manage the membership. We often get, when we talk to people about CLOCS, we get lots of nodding heads. People nod and go, yep, sounds great, brilliant, want to be part of that, love it, love the message. What do we do? How do we do it? Now we sit here and think it's very simple, read the standard, do the standard, but people want to put it into something slightly easier. So we're developing some implementation guidance initially at contractors on how they should actually set up their projects and what have you, but we'll also have some guidance for clients and regulators. We had a meeting with somebody up in Manchester recently, and she said, oh, I love this CLOCS thing, but I've put it in the don't know what to do with it box. So I say for us, it seems very simple, but clearly there's a slight disconnect out there as to, right, what do I actually do? I've signed up, great, what do I do now? We're developing some online self-assessment tools so that the people out there implementing CLOCS can actually go on to a website, fill in a series of questions, a questionnaire checklist, and it'll give them a score and tell them where they're doing well, where they're not doing well, and importantly and critically, and then direct them and signpost them towards resources and examples and case studies to say, okay, you're not doing so well in this area. Here's more information for you to go and have a look at. We're developing a gates check app so that the teams on the gates can quickly pick up a tablet or PD or a phone, check vehicle equipment, check licensing, check driver training, check accreditations, what have you, and importantly that'll all be recorded and available afterwards to have a look at. We're developing a reward and recognition scheme. We find that the carrot works better than the stick. When we want people to adopt things, we can tell them that they have to, we can tell them that they should, we can tell them that they shall. We agree with them that they'll do a certain level of monitoring, but that happens and doesn't happen in different areas. And we know, and certainly from my days at constructor scheme, that if there's an element of reward, whether that's a certificate, whether it's a level, your CLOCS plus, CLOCS plus plus, CLOCS outstanding, CLOCS gold, whatever it might well be, that tends to drive the right behaviors. So we're looking to put in some recognition for each of our stakeholder groups to say, look, here's, if you're doing the standard, great, you get the CLOCS badge, but if you're doing above and beyond, here's some recognition. So we started some work on that. We're also looking at our member segmentation. So we've got one membership type, which is CLOCS champions. And we've got the 4 stakeholder groups, but we want some different membership models to target different audiences, like suppliers, the people who provide equipment or training or wagons and what have you. So we're developing a CLOCS supplier proposition as well. And importantly, as part of our business plan, we've just taken on a focused business development manager to really help us now start to spread the word beyond London to get more engagement, not just with new champions, but importantly with our existing champions to make sure they do feel they have a connection with CLOCS and feel part of the CLOCS community, as we call it here. So that's an exciting development for us over the next 12 months. So I've talked for probably not far off 20 minutes, I think. That's my final slide, but should I stop sharing my screen? Let's have a quick look. There we go. There you go. So Jerome, Michael, over to you, I guess.
Andy, that was fantastic, mate. So thank you so much for all those insights. I think, and it looks like you're having like the future coming out of COVID, out of the Brexit and those sort of things, and you've got a whole pipeline of things underway as you're taking it forward. So I'm just intrigued to know how does SECB get the contract to deliver CLOCS?
Yeah, CLOCS was originally run by TfL, and they very quickly identified they didn't have the resource and perhaps the inclination to run it. They had outsourced FORS a long time ago. I think FORS is about 17, 18 years now. So that had been outsourced to AECOM, although recently it's been switched to a new provider. And they put it out to tender. And my old company, Consider It Construct a Scheme, put themselves forward, as did SECB, as did an organisation called Build UK, and a trade body, and as did an organisation called LHC, who were procurement specialists. And the story goes, and I do believe this is a story, that being quite small, incestuous industry, that people knew each other, and that these four parties, and I certainly, we knew SECB, and my old boss at CCS, Matt, knew those, and they all turned up in some area for that initial presentation from TfL to the supplier, said that this is what it is, this is what you're tendering for. And they all had a cup of coffee and said, why don't we do this together? Why are we competing against each other? We've got different strengths and weaknesses, we've got different audiences. Why don't we work together as a group rather than competing to take on CLOCS? So it needed a name. So SECB, Derek agreed to be the lead party, to actually be the one who signed the paperwork, had the contract, but very much working in partnership with these other organisations. So let's say Build UK, CCS, you'll find them on our website. You'll find them at the back of the standard of reference as being CLOCS partners. So SECB as an organisation is a small organisation. We are, I'll use the word carefully, consultancy. We're not quite a consultancy, but we provide guidance and support for various initiatives across the industry. SECB's been around for 20, 30 years, part of the constructing excellence network across the UK. We have three other working streams that complement CLOCS, but very disconnected to CLOCS. They're nothing to do with it, very different brands, very different entities, but as a team set, we kind of work together. We have marketing support and what have you. So the driver for SECB is innovation, inspiration, and collaboration. They're the lovely words you'll see on our website. Now, they've always been what SECB is about. So when CLOCS landed in our laps a little bit as an idea, it ticked all right boxes about wanting to do the right thing for the right reasons. CLOCS is not for profit. We're not a huge turnover company. You can do your own sums. If you look at 350 members or 350 paying members at 850 quid a membership, bit of training revenue, our turnover is only 320, 330,000 pounds. We're a small team. But yeah, SECB wanted to do it for the right reasons, so saw an opportunity through those different groups who had audience and influence. Importantly, these big trade bodies have a membership base of 10,000, whatever it might well be, and have that connection, that we saw that opportunity by working together to quickly try and get that word of CLOCS out there across the UK, and to get that buy-in again through collaboration. So we talk about collaboration, and it was put together on a very collaborative basis through SECB and other parties.
I might jump in there, Jerome. Thanks for that, Andy. Just got a question. So, Andy, you spoke about the Consider It Constructors scheme, and that you came along from that program actually before. I've read a bit about that scheme, and they do some really great work from, trying to make construction, I guess, less disruptive to the community from like a noise or dust, that those sort of issues that come, I guess, from the environmental side of things. In terms of the auditing process that SECB or the CCS undertake, are you able to talk through that a bit more? Because you did mention about the self-assessment process, and also previously when we met, and also in your standards there is a site visit involved as well. Would you be able to talk just briefly about how that works?
Absolutely. Critical to any standard set requirements is some mechanism to validate that. It's not enough to say, well, I'll pay my fee and I'll have the badge and I'll shout about how I'm a CLOCS champion. You've got to be able to follow that up. So again, this came from the working group and the SSGB several years ago, to say, well, let's put something in place to validate that. Now for operators, it's easier because they have to gain accreditation through a third party. So if they can demonstrate, they can come to us with a certificate and say, look, I'm for silver. That's a tick in the box for us. Somebody else has validated that. Somebody else has assessed that. We're happy with that. Clients and regulators, we don't really audit as much, as their requirements are simpler. They basically, they either do it or they don't do it. If they're not going to do it, why would they sign up to CLOCS? Because they don't really need the branding. They don't need that ethical badge of conformance. So that's about them building into their procurement processes and building into their planning processes. And we give them all the tools and resources to do that. We probably, next stage, we'll look at some validation around that. Contractors and sites with a key part. As again, you can see from the standard that they've got the bulk of the requirements. So consider constructor scheme, exists to manage the impact of construction on communities, on the environment, and on the workforce critically. And what we said was that you could be building anything. You could be building a nuclear reactor in the middle of the Lake District. Is that a good idea? Probably not. Not our decision. What we're saying is somebody somewhere has made that decision to do it, and now we want to manage that impact as much as possible to minimise it. So the Consider Constructor Scheme registers about 5,000 projects a year across the UK, typically the bigger things. And they have a team of field-based monitors who go out and visit every project twice a year. So they conduct about 10,000 visits a year to construction projects and score them against a checklist and give them a rating. So when CLOCS looked at doing this, and with CCS being a partner, it was identified that rather than CLOCS employing its own or engaging its own base of field-based monitors and put together the systems of remuneration and auditing and training and what have you, could we tap into that? And I was actually involved in that critically from the other side when I was at CCS. I was general manager there. So what we say to projects, because the vast majority of people who are CLOCS champions are also part of CCS, so they register and pay a fee to CCS. So that monitor is going to visit that project twice a year. So we tie into that process. So rather than the monitor having to take, jump in a car at a different time and take a different journey and do a different thing, we say, look, go along and do your CCS visit. So we can reduce the costs to the contractor, reduce the impact on the environment, one journey, reduce vehicle journeys critically. And that monitor turns up, does his CCS thing, gets to the end of the meeting, takes his CCS hat off, puts his CLOCS hat on and says, right, a couple more questions for you. And importantly, they've saved time because the CCS thing overlaps a little bit with CLOCS, because they talk about impact on communities, they talk about traffic management plans, they talk about safety at the site boundary and things like that. So they've already answered a few of those questions. They've already had the cup of tea, they've already had the tour around the site and what have you. They can save time. If you turned up to do a CLOCS visit cold, it would take about 2.5 hours. If you can do it at the end of a CCS visit, it takes about 45 minutes an hour because you just saved all that time. So it's a separate process, separate checklist. And we use the CCS systems. The monitor writes up his report, gives it a score, uploads it, and it goes out to the contractor with this CCS report. So because we've been able to do that, we keep the cost really low. It's a couple £100, it's £240, I think, for a CLOCS monitoring audit. We agreed with the working group that all contractors would have about 20% of their projects audited. With a few exceptions, none of them came close to that. They're all, single figures, 8%, 9%, 10%, which is when we started saying, look, you've all said you're going to do it, but you're not doing it. How do we change this? And we end up going down that, rather than beating them up and saying, you have to, what would incentivize your teams to sign up to this? And we came around this reward and recognition thing. The self-assessment tool was to help contractors on all of their projects quickly and cheaply and easily be able to do self-assessments. It'll be free of charge to champions. They'll have it on this portal we're developing. So Wilmot Dixon, big contractor, national contractor, can send it out to their 100 projects and say, right, all go and register on this website, create your projects on building, the Reading Hospital, and then do self-assessments. And critically for our champion contacts, they'll then have a dashboard. They can see how all of their projects are doing. They can see, we'll do aggregated data. They can see, look, I'm doing really well in sections 1, 2, and 3, but not so good in section 4. Perhaps you have a training need there, or understanding need. We'll have that aggregated data for the industry, so we can see across the standard where people are doing well and not so well. We've already got our anecdotal data on where there are challenges, and where they then want that score validated for the recognition. So they do a self-assessment and think, actually, you know what, I'm doing quite well here. I think I'm performing above and beyond. I can press a button, request a validation. The monitor will go along through CCS, give them a score. Great, you're CLOCS Plus, CLOCS Gold, wherever it will be, and we'll send them out a lovely flag or a certificate or a banner to put on the project. So that's that monitoring thing's been in place for a number of years, very successfully. It works well. Critically, from our point of view, this isn't about complying or not complying, failing or passing. This is about helping people be better. So it's more about recognition of where people are doing well and suggestion and guidance on where they can do something a bit differently.
That's great.
Thanks, Andy. Question here from Nikki. She wants to know, how big was the team working on design collateral, the websites, communications, information design, socials, plus more, and for how long? So this might be a little bit before your time, but I'm not sure if you're able to answer that one.
Not big. How big was the team? Not big. You know, CLOCS has never been big. A lot of the branding and website was originally done by TfL. So no, I don't know the answer to that question. They passed us, and we still abide by a set of branding guidelines that have given us, you know, all of the imagery that you see in the bottom of my slides, of the little graphics and what have you. The fonts we're allowed to use, the colors we're allowed to use. That was all defined to us and given to us by TfL. We're fine. We work within that. As we're updating our website now, we might try and push it a little bit beyond what they want us to do, but they're quite hands off, and they'll be fine with that. Resources have always been historically and very importantly developed largely by our members, by tapping into that technical expertise that exists within the industry. So I'd say our nearly all of our CLP resources were developed by teams of people. So Arup, a big consultancy firm, developed a lot of it. ACOM helped develop some, but HS2 high speed to, you know, multi-billion-pound project across the UK. They've got massive resources and massive challenges. So they're developing their own systems and helping us develop training. So the CLOCS team today is myself, a BDM, a business support manager, and a little bit of an administrator and a bit of a marketing manager. So, you know, it's 3 and a bit people CLOCS today. So we don't have a lot of resource internally. Sorry, I've got a cat that's being quite noisy in the ground. So CLOCS has never been, you know, resource heavy. And as even its TfL days, I know it wasn't resource heavy. But it doesn't need a lot of maintenance. We develop things, but we don't develop a lot of things quickly. So we can invest energy in getting it right, putting together, you know, task and finish groups. So for developing, for example, this next thing about developing an implementation guide for sites, we've already gone out to a few contractors and said that, you know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And they've sort of said, well, look, we've got this toolbox talk we put together, or we've put together this PowerPoint presentation. She said, great, we'll steal those, we'll give you credit. And we'll work with them as a task and finish group to come together. Yes, I can put stuff together. I've got a good level of knowledge, but I don't do it. I don't work in a construction site. So critically, we have to, from a resource point of view, we have to tap into that, but also from a credibility point of view, we have to tap into that stakeholder resource. It's much easier for us to go out to our champions and say that we've developed this stuff working with Wilmot Dixon, with ISG, and with Balfour Beatty, than it is just saying, I've come up with this brilliant thing, I think it's great, here you go. So that doesn't necessarily, you know, does it take resource? It does. Does CLOCS need to provide all that resource? No, it doesn't. And I think that collaboration and buy-in is critical. You know, CLOCS could not exist without the goodwill, and I suppose that's the goodwill of our champions who give up time. You know, we've got working groups, we've got an SSGB, it's all, you know, voluntary. We don't remunerate our CLOCS board to turn up to 2 or 3 meetings they have a year. That's 2 or 3 half-day meetings. We ask them to check standards and to validate stuff and suggest stuff, and that's all done, you know, obviously with the buy-in of their company, but very much because they believe in it and want to invest that energy and time into CLOCS being developed and pushed forward.
That's similar. Yeah, it's great to hear that, Andy. It's similar to, I guess, yeah, where we're at in Australia. You know, a lot of it is basically done out of the goodwill and, you know, the free time that we have at 7 o'clock at night to do a webinar. So, no, definitely, it's great to hear. Just got another question here about, yeah, so in regards to CLOCS implementation and your experience seeing it sort of, you know, permeate across the UK, is it just exclusive to major projects, or are you seeing it on, you know, the local building development, or, you know, smaller construction projects? Are they adopting the standard?
Yes. Now, an important point to make, and we have this conversation with a lot of people. So we, for example, we might take on a client. We've taken on Heathrow, so massive amount of work going on in Heathrow Airport. Yeah. Or we take on big frameworks. You know, we've taken on Scape framework, whose annual spend is 69 billion or something like that. So they then go out to all their contractors on the framework and say, you all have to start working to the CLOCS standard. Now, a lot of their contractors will be CLOCS champions, who'll go, yeah, great, get it, no problem at all. Some people won't know of CLOCS and will go, whoa, and, you know, a new set of hoops we have to jump through, a new set of requirements. No, not very happy. So we then go along and talk to them. And a critical message for most people is, you're doing this already. This isn't a new set of requirements. This isn't a new set of things. This is, I say, the CLOCS standard reflects best practice in the industry. So when you break it down into plain English and you talk about, you know, do you have control at your gate? Do you have site access traffic marshals or gatesmen or banksmen, whatever you want to call them? Do you manage loading and unloading? Do you do route planning? They all kind of nod their head and go, of course we do all that. We could not do it. It's like, well, there you go. You're kind of doing most of CLOCS anyway. Whether you recognize it or label it as CLOCS is less important. The value of CLOCS is about doing it in a collaborative way, and there'll be little things they might not be doing. So things like data reporting, collision reporting, and feeding it up and doing action plans, and the CLP being a critical element. They all do plans. They might call it a traffic management plan or a construction management plan. They might call it something different, and it probably doesn't look quite like a CLP. So again, that's that bringing them just move over here a little bit. So we talk about one of the things within the standard for clients is talking about that client shall define the scope of CLOCS implementation with the contractor. So that's recognizing that every project is different. So if you're doing a small fit out job, you might not need to do a comprehensive site management plan. You might not. You're not going to have a site access, a site access traffic marshals because a van's coming into the lobby of a building and something's going in the elevator and getting taken up to the roof. So it's different. But we talk about operating within the spirit of CLOCS. So okay, whether you recognise it and do everything is perhaps less important than how you approach something and how you do it. So if there's a sensible conversation by all the stakeholders to go that we don't need to do that because it's not going to add value and it doesn't create a risk. So we talk about risk assessing all the time. Then drop it. Don't do it. I had a meeting recently with Imperial College in London who have signed up as a CLOCS champion, and they've asked a contractor to start doing CLOCS, but the procurement process started a while ago. So they come in late and said, do CLOCS. So the contractor's gone, whoa, we didn't agree to this at the outset. What are you doing? So they had that because part of the CLOCS standard talks about procuring for CLOCS. Now they couldn't do that because that process has happened, and they were all getting a bit of a tangle about, well, what do we do? And it's like, well, you can't do it. You can't go. It's done. Just don't sweat it. It's finished. Just move forward. What can you do? What will you do? So I say we don't want to beat people with a stick and say you haven't done X, Y, and Z. Yes, we want them to do X, Y, and Z. We want to recognise and encourage that. And we also talk about CLOCS being a journey. So when you sign up to CLOCS, you don't need to be complying fully on day one. You have to commit to getting there at some point. You have to go, yeah, we believe in CLOCS. We think it's a good thing. We're not there yet. We're down here. And we ask them to do an implementation plan when they sign up to kind of tell us where they are. And we commit to getting there. And that could be in 6 months, could be in 12 months, could be in 24 months. They might say, look, we're a big national contractor. Implementing some of the stuff's going to take us a while. We have to invest time and resources in training. And we say, fine, as long as the only reason we would turn somebody down is if they signed up and said, not going to do that, got no intention of doing any of it. Then we would say, well, you can't be a CLOCS champion. You can't use that badge. But yeah, the implementation is not necessarily a hard and fast rule. It's down to people to talk about it, to agree the scope of how CLOCS is going to be implemented, to look pragmatically at what's possible and what's sensible. We can't just decide you're not going to do something because you can't be bothered. That's not what it's about. But if it's a sensible conversation, it should be risk assessed and probably documented to say, this is how it's going to be implemented, then we're fine. It's about, it's a little bit about the spirit of recognizing what should be done. And ultimately it's about ensuring the safest vehicle journey. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, I like that, and making it scalable towards the size and complexity of the project that it's being applied to.
Absolutely. I love that idea of that journey as well, and they're going along that pathway. I guess that's an interesting one here, which Kim asks. A safety legal question: has anyone that implemented CLOCS used their CLOCS certification to plead a lower workplace sentence for any serious instances that might be involved in? Bit of a different angle.
Don't know simple answer. I'm not aware of that. Never come across that. We talk about fatalities more than we would like, of course, and they do still go on. We still get the news reports come through every couple of weeks. It's not a huge number, thank the Lord. Again, CLOCS is born from the issue that construction-related fatalities outside the hoarding were disproportionately high. So construction and traffic accounted for whatever, construction vehicles accounted for, say, 4% of the traffic on the roads, but accounted for sort of 20% of the fatalities. So there was that disproportion. But that 20% was still, thankfully a lower number than perhaps it could be. We know that CLOCS, one of the things we're looking at now is data. So a lot of the CLOCS history has been based on anecdotal information, anecdotal feedback of impact that it's having from clients. We get feedback from clients, major clients who do the studies themselves, to say that a CLOCS registered project will have a positive impact on the environment because they do their scope 3 emissions and look at the emissions that are coming from construction traffic. They will have fewer complaints from the general public around congestion and noise and idling vehicles and what have you. They will have, a better standard because they're procuring to a higher standard. So they're procuring people who are 4 silver, who have got the latest vehicles, what have you, so they can demonstrate those efficiencies. We don't have a lot of that data, so we're now working to try and get some of that data from our contractors. To answer that question, I'm not aware that CLOCS has been used as any kind of defense, if you like. We know that adoption, and it's something we're looking at. We've talked to a few insurers, actually. There was interest from insurers to say, we suspect that a CLOCS registered project is lower risk than a non-CLOCS registered project. What can we do? Because we'd like to recognize that. And it's something we're talking about at the moment. So FORS is further down that line. So if you are FORS Gold, for example, and one of our CLOCS champions is a waste company called O'Donovan's, run by a lady called Jackie O'Donovan, and she is very high profile in the industry, very much champions these accreditations and these standards, and she sits on the FORS board. And they have been able to reduce their insurance premiums significantly over the years by demonstration of FORS Gold and demonstration of the standards that they've adopted. And because it's done within that framework, being able to give the insurers clarity on what that actually means, rather than just say, look, we're safe, we're doing these wonderful things, and say, well, this is what FORS Gold is. So by working with the insurance industry and getting the industry to recognize what some of these standards mean and the impact, positive impact they have, is driving our insurance premiums. So that's perhaps a different way of looking at it. But, as a question, no, not aware of, but, is it going on? Very possibly.
That's great. I'm going to ask a question about going back to the standard. I know you touched on this a bit already, but obviously there's a diverse stakeholder group in terms of the development of the standard, and I know a lot of this was done before your time, Andy, but if you have some insight into this, we'd love to hear about it, and particularly with the review that's coming up. I know you're not doing a major review, but in terms of making changes to the standard and achieving harmonization of the standards, how do you go about achieving that and gaining that consensus when you do have such a diverse stakeholder group? You might have some people that are looking for gold-plated, and then you might have some people that are just, just complying. So how do you, I guess, gain that?
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing to acknowledge from the outset is that when you've got a community, and we had this at CCS as well, and we've got it at CLOCS, when you've got a membership-based organisation, you're going to have some members who are very engaged, who are very keen, who respond to the emails, who pick up the phone, who turn up to the meetings, who give a damn, who really are invested emotionally in what it is. And then you've got a lot of people in the middle who kind of, they'll turn up occasionally and have a voice occasionally and what have you. And then you've got people at the other end, who no interest. They sign up, want the badge, pay the fee, and that's it. And they say all the right things, and we have to, and we validate as much as we can, but you're not going to get that level of engagement. So so we've got these 350 members, we've got a working group of 90 and an SSGB of 12 or 13. And so, for example, with the CLOCS, we're a bit behind schedule. We were supposed to have the CLOCS standard updated by end of the year, but other things have just overtaken us. So last August, I think it was July, August, we emailed all of our champions and said, it's time for CLOCS review, standard review. We do it every 2 years. You know about that. What do you want us to do? Any ideas, any suggestions, what have you? And we get emails in and ideas and suggestions. Everything's collated. The CLOCS team, we don't filter anything out. We collate everything. We go back and ask for clarification if needs be. We don't just ask our stakeholder group. We go to things like charities and some of these trade bodies as well, and vehicle manufacturers. We invite feedback from anybody and everybody as to what CLOCS should be doing a bit differently. So we gave them the remit if we want this to be a light touch. But that, if you've got something, tell us, and that's our intention. So we get all the feedback in. We then take that to the SSGB and say, here's all the feedback we've got. And then, depending on how much that is and how complex it is, the SSGB will put together a task and finish group of, say, 3 or 4 representatives, represent from each of the stakeholder groups. They'll have an operator on there and a contractor and a regulator on there to say, well, okay, we'll sit down separately, have some meetings to filter that down to kind of go, yes, no, that's ridiculous, we like that. Filter that down. Working with me to develop, right, okay, we'll do a draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. So we go through this iterative process of refining and making changes, bouncing off the SSGB for guidance. And then at the end of that process, we have a draft that we then go back to the working group to say, based on the feedback you gave us and the process we've now been through, this is the draft we've got. Here's a summary of changes. So changes section 2.1 and 2.4 and 6.5. And this is a summary of what, and importantly, why. So that's the process we go through. And you talk about that consensus is, and that identification of the stakeholder groups has been so critically important to CLOCS and identifying robustly those four stakeholders, and then having the right mix on the working group. So when we went out and invited people to join the working groups, we very much tried to keep that in line with the makeup of the demographics, if you like, of our membership. So rather than having a working group that's 80% operators and 19% contractors and 1% client, that doesn't give us a representative voice. So we try and make sure that share, if you like, is representative. And what's handy is on the board, we always, when we want to update the board, we're going to go out to all the champions and say, nominate yourselves. Who wants to be on the board? This is what it is. It's voluntary. Here's the terms of reference for the board. This is what it is. That's importantly, you're there to represent your stakeholder group, not your company. Yes, that's relevant, of course, but you're not there to say, well, HS2 wants this. You're there to go, well, industry clients want this. And what works very well is having some organisations who work across those stakeholder groups. For example, we've got Balfour Beatty on the board at the moment, who are both a contractor and a fleet operator. So they have that sort of dual aspect. We've got a couple of local authorities in there who are both regulators and clients. We've got a house builder in there who's a client and a contractor. So they are, by definition, able to look at different sides, if you like, with the same hat on. It's done, it's very much a democracy. It's everybody has a vote and everybody has a say and what have you. We rarely have conflict. We're having a slight challenge at the moment. I don't mind saying that, in this issue of fleet accreditation, I think I mentioned we're doing some fleet accreditation guidance. That can be quite an emotive subject because some people are very invested in one accreditation. Force being a good example. Some people have invested a lot of time and money and energy becoming Force Gold and see that as a real badge of honor, and it gives them commercial advantage. If they can go out and say we're Force Gold and with this, and that demonstrates clock compliance, so they like that. So as soon as we talk about diluting that by recognizing other standards, politics can play a role. People can, well, no, I don't think we should be doing that. I think I want us to stay over here because of my own personal interest. So we have to manage that, and within the terms of reference to SSGB, it talks about having an open mind and being able to, respect others' opinions and what have you. So whether by design or whether by luck, it's always worked very well. We've never really had a standoff or conflict. There are some things within the standard when I first joined that, or as I said before I joined, when I was at CCS, we were putting together the checklist for the monitoring, and there was some bit in the standard that we just didn't understand, and we emailed CLOCS and said, section 2.3 says this. What does that actually mean? And it went around the houses at CLOCS, and we kind of got a response back eventually. Said, none of us are very sure, actually. Because it had been developed by this working group, a handful of people who said, oh, this is a great idea, we'll put this in. And it was just gobbledygook, and none of us could actually decide. Nobody at CLOCS could either. So so there are things occasionally that designed by committee type thing, that sometimes you end up with something and everybody kind of goes, well, it doesn't cause me a problem, it's fine. And then when you actually tackle it, it doesn't really do very much or actually help anybody. It's just kind of like they've talked about a subject, couldn't really come to conclusions, so they've kind of gone like that. But having that working group and having the SSGB has been critical to giving that back to the industry, to say that you're industry representatives, you're bright people, you're capable people, you're doing this every day, you're part of CLOCS for the right reasons, you're not there from a purely selfish point of view, you're trying to make the industry a better place. It works pretty well. So getting the right people and the right stakeholder mix has been critical.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. And quickly, how big is your board, just out of interest?
The SSGB is, I think at the moment, 13 people. When we first put the boards together, it was, I think, 13. And it was supposed to be renewed every 2 years. Now, that end of 2 years was the end of 2020, when we were splat bang in the middle of the pandemic. So it was agreed by the SSGB, ratified by the working group, that we would give them another year. So actually that first set of people went on for 3 years. So again, middle of last year, went out to the CLOCS champions and said that what was always agreed from the outset was we wouldn't do them for 3 years, sack them all off and get another load. The intention was every 2 years. We've now changed it to every 3 years because it's worked well. Every 3 years, a third of the board will step down and we'll get another 4 on, and then a year later, another third. And so we've got that constant new voices, new faces, new thinking coming into the board. It's still involved. We go out and say, right, board, who wants to stand down? Some of them are quite happy to because they're just busy or their jobs have changed and they want to move on to something else. Otherwise, we again, what we want to do is keep that stakeholder mix. So we wouldn't want 4 operators on the board saying we all want to step down. We try to go, well, 1 client, 1 contractor, what have you. The commitment level for the SSGB seems about right. That doesn't cause any of them a massive problem. They can all do it without going, this is too much, I can't manage it. Although we're very honest from the outset, the commitment that's needed. But the SSGB, yes, has been a huge success, and we've got some very good and very bright, capable people on there. So I say we've just put HS2 on there. We've just put a charity on there called Road Peace. We've got a logistics company called Allendale who've just joined. So again, we really look for that breadth of experience and differing views. You know, it's really important. People who will challenge and what have you, different ideas.
And there's a question here from Owen. Has membership of the program driven, pardon the pun, a culture of awarding contracts work to operators by construction companies or creating sole provider relationships within the network?
Say that again.
So basically, I guess, has it created an opportunity where organisations who are part of CLOCS, everyone begins, once you're in the CLOCS community, it seems everyone's getting awarded more contract within the community.
Yes. Yeah, one of the things we talk about is one of the reasons for CLOCS is to create that commercial environment where it creates an advantage to be part of the CLOCS community by which again is why we, one of the slides I put up, and I'll probably skip past it quite quickly, was the 4 stakeholder groups, and we have 2 arrows, and we have one about influence and one about information. And we talk about that influence starts with regulators, the person giving the planning permission, and then it goes to clients, developers, and then contractors and operators. So that the influence works that way. And critically, we need information to come out the other way. So we need collision and serious injury data to come from the operators to the contractors to have that awareness, and contractors to clients and what have you. So we've got those 2 arrows. So yes, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to engage clients and regulators, because if we get a regulator on board or a client on board who's happy to procure for CLOCS, the rest of it just happens from our perspective, which is great. And yes, where we've got clients like HS2 who, you know, have got an insane spend, an insane budget, if we can get them to say, well, yes, we're only going to work with CLOCS champions, that's great for us. Of course it is. So yes, we very deliberately want clients and regulators and contractors to procure for CLOCS, and therefore to create that commercial demand for CLOCS. A critical point, and it's not necessarily been done deliberately, but it's how we've ended up. What we find is that clients and regulators don't demand that people sign up to CLOCS and become a CLOCS member. They demand and procure that they operate to the CLOCS standard, which anybody can do, whether you're a member or not, because it's just a set of health and safety requirements. It's freely available on the website. So a contractor can tender for a job and say, yes, we'll absolutely work to the CLOCS standard. They don't have to be a CLOCS member to do that. If they become a CLOCS member, they get help and support and guidance and resources and that to help them do that, but they don't need to be a CLOCS champion. And we kind of went back and thought, oh, is this a good thing? Is this not a good thing? Should we be asking clients and regulators to demand CLOCS membership or CLOCS compliance? And we felt that actually CLOCS compliance is ultimately what it's all about. We're about raising standards and what have you. Now, if they pay us a fee, brilliant. We love that. We want them to be part of the CLOCS community. So no, the demand is driven at CLOCS compliance. And as I say, for a lot of these big contractors, they're doing it already, so it doesn't cause them a massive problem to make that leap.
Andy, I hope, do you have a few more minutes? We do have a couple more questions.
Yeah,
if
my
that's
day
all right.
has just started, Michael. I've got the whole day.
Wonderful. Appreciate it. We had a question come from one of our colleagues who's, I think he's on leave at the moment, but this relates to one of our technical groups. We're really trying to sort of work out, you know, what are the best strategies, and this particularly relates to the planned measures that you talk about that construction projects and principal contractors have to both consider and seek to implement on their projects. This question is basically, what are the top 3 logistics related actions, initiatives, requirements, i.e. the planned measures within CLOCS requirements within CLOCS requirements and or rising from the vulnerable road user focus area that have had the biggest impact on reducing that risk to vulnerable road users from construction logistics. I hope that made sense. It's sort of, what are those 3 bang for buck top ticket items that are having the greatest impact on reducing the risks to vulnerable road users from construction logistics.
there's I don't have the data. I can tell you anecdotally my feelings, again, based on feedback from contractors and clients, what have you. So we've got a document somewhere on the website that talks about planned measures, and it lists them. It's not a final, it's not a defined list of these are planned measures and nothing else is. So it's anything about largely reducing vehicle journeys, and some of that can be a bit faddy. So something we're seeing an awful lot of at the moment is cargo bikes.
Okay.
Last mile deliveries, certainly in London, where you got these. I don't know if you've seen them over there at all yet. I don't know if it isn't something I'm gobbledygook, but a bike with a massive big loading tray in front that a lot of materials and stuff can be loaded onto. That is something that is really taken off in London, hugely taken off in London. We're seeing an awful lot of now. And there's been a lot of studies, and there's been upsides and downsides and risks and what have you, and it's been pushed back in some areas, but generally the momentum is there now that cargo bikes in London, we're seeing more and more of it. It's still very new, it's still a bit faddy, but everything would indicate that that's going to have a big impact. Something that is perhaps, that is prevalent, but perhaps hasn't taken off as much as any of us thought it would, which is a bit of a surprise, is consolidation centres and holding areas. So we've got a number of consolidation centres around sort of the M25 around London, where, and again, I don't know if you've got the same concept in Australia, so where any suppliers can drop off materials, or rather than driving all the way into London, all these wagons can drop off their materials at consolidation centre, and then that consolidation centre will put the materials for 4 or 5 different projects in the back of one wagon, drive into London, go to project A, then B, then C, then D, and then go home. So it's an amazing concept, and everybody, when it's been around for a long time, but it was kind of given this shape and definition a little while ago, and everybody went, yeah, that's the future, brilliant, makes perfect sense. And it does work, and it is taking on. It didn't take off quite as much as we thought. There's things on there like use of rail and use of river that of course are good and valuable, but that's very project specific. You're either next to a river or you're not next to a river. Exactly. Rail's either an option or it's not. It's very hard to go, well, let's we've got this project, let's use rail on this project, because it often doesn't work, which again is why we say, well, think about it, because it might exist as an option, you might just not have thought about it. One of the plan measures is about route planning. And we sometimes forget that, because it's such an intrinsic part of the standard, that by effective route planning, and it's something, again, I think is done fantastically well, but not done well enough by enough people. That can be such a critical thing. And there's some, you must have what 3 words over there? Do you have what 3 words?
No, not that I'm aware of.
I don't know. Every 3 meter square surface of the earth, including Australia, and I'll Google it later, has been given 3 words to define it. So it could be, I don't know, carpet, handbag, toilet, whatever, pick 3 words. And you can Google your house on What 3 Words website and find out and it sounds a bit daft, but it's a good way, because when we try to get things to a construction site, that can often be quite difficult, because it doesn't necessarily have a defined postcode or defined address. It can be a massive bit of area with 3 different gates in different places. So saying to a supplier, you need to get to that construction site. The construction wagon turns up, it's something you're looking left and right, and it's driving around and then missed the gates and now reversing and what have you. So what 3 words is a way of pinpointing a specific 3 meter square area of the earth. And I say it's Australia as well. So if you look at what 3 words, it'll all be on there. And we're talking to what 3 words. It's a very new bit of software, and looking at how that can be built into route planning as well to really help supplier get from A to B, not close to B or near to B or B-ish, but A to B. So route planning is something we're looking more and more at. We're working with CrashMap as well. So CrashMap's freely available, but they have a paid for service called CrashMap Pro that does route planning as well. So CrashMap will show you, there's A, there's B, and there's all the crashes between A and B. But it doesn't help you necessarily plan your route. You have to sit with a pen and paper and kind of go, well, hang on, left, up, down, no, that's a small road. So we think that having that data and merging it with some kind of route planning software will help that. And interestingly, we're also trying to engage with some of the big sat-nav people, because what they often give you is the quickest route and the route avoiding toll roads. What they often do, well, what none of them give you is the safest route.
Yeah.
So could you in a sat-nav say, I want the safest route, using some of that historical DFT, Department for Transport, accident data, collision data, to say, well, actually, let's avoid the hotspots and what have you. So route planning is a big one for us. There's other bits and bobs in there that very much exist, that sometimes are picked up by projects where it works, that particular project. That's kind of an answer.
No, that's great.
Looking at Kim's comment, what was that comment about what 3 words?
Just
another-
What three words? What three words is very interesting. There are some challenges, and it's not quite there yet because obviously a lot of words sound very similar. So they're talking about the emergency services using it. So if you've broken down on your car by the side of the road and you say my three words are whatever, and somebody at the end hears a word differently. We have heard of a fire engine in London being given a what three words address for somewhere in the Himalayas. One word was different. One word sounded the same, and they do that deliberately because they say that where there are possible clashes, they'll deliberately put them on the other side of the world. So somebody looking and go, that's not right. That's clearly not right. But it's an interesting concept, so worth a look at.
Look forward to looking it up.
Being over in the UK and hearing the varieties of accents from town to town, it doesn't surprise me really.
Yeah.
I'm just mindful of time, so I might just try and get through a couple of very quick questions for 30 seconds, and then we'll have to look at more efforts, all right, I guess. What learnings or recommendations would you make to Australia in adapting CLOCS locally?
It's an interesting one. Obviously, I'm not quite aware of where you guys are at the moment. You know, we very much need to work with regulators because, and I don't say it's an easy sell to regulators. Nothing's an easy sell to regulators. You know, local authorities over here are pressurised for time and resources, and are stuck in their own little bureaucracy of who can make decisions and what have you. So that can be quite a long bit of work. But getting into a local council, a London borough, and getting them to recognise and understand the value from their perspective of, you know, certainly reducing collisions and fatalities, reducing congestion is a big thing in London, certainly in any built-up area, reducing public complaints. I mean, if you can talk to a local authority, a London borough, about, you know, I've got this thing that will reduce the number of irate people ringing you up from your community, they're very interested because that's a bane of their life. So what we did was we went through an exercise. We're still kind of doing it, thinking, right, what are all the benefits from CLOCS? Everything we can think of that the adoption of CLOCS will have a benefit on. And then go through the individual stakeholder groups going, okay, well, those 4 or 5 are very relevant to those, but these 3 or 4 probably aren't, and these 6 or 7 are relevant. So it's not the same pitch to everybody. It's thinking of, you know, yes, a London borough, a local authority is very interested in congestion. Operator, not so bothered really, because it's not their patch. They're driving in and driving out. They're not worried about that bigger picture possibly, or it's not important enough, if that makes sense. So understanding the stakeholder groups and understanding their pain points is a way we often put it, is what's the pain are they feeling, and how can we let them see that CLOCS is an answer to that pain. That everybody sees it like any new set of requirements. People's first reaction is it's something new, it's something extra, it's something additional that I'm now going to have to do. And again, from local authorities, you often get that pushback of, well, I love it, but I can't resource it, I've not got the budget. So then you have to have that conversation. Well, no, hang on a second. You know, if you adopt CLPs as an example, so use a standard form for CLP for London Borough or a local authority and say, and you can, I tell you what, local authority, you can send your team of people on our course free of charge because we're running it anyway. It's all online Zoom. So get your people on, we'll train them on what CLP looks like. It'll then mean if you require CLPs, CLOCS CLPs as part of the planning process, it means every time you get one, you recognize it because it's done in the same format and the same structure with the same sections. Because at the moment, every CLP looks different. Everybody does it differently. So it means every time they're looking at one going, right, hang on, is that got section? No, that section, something over here. So by creating that consistency, it really helps their time because they can turn things around a lot more quickly. So things like planned measures and what we say in the CLP template is you don't have to do them, but within the CLP, explain that they've been considered and explain why they've been rejected. So when the local authority gets it, they don't have to go back and say, oh, have you thought of? They can look at it and go, oh, they have thought of not doing it. So it really should create those efficiencies in the local authority and should then therefore save them time and money, which the time and money are the big selling points to local authorities and regulators. So implementation, as I say, is understanding what CLOCS is and understanding the benefits to the different stakeholder groups. And yeah, you know, being honest, it is a slow sell, you know, which can be frustrating at times. You know, again, I know that from my days at CCS, you have that kind of growth of looking to get the momentum, and when that momentum goes, it often really goes like that. Is creating that critical mass of, you know, tapping into organizations who are already doing it, tapping into organizations who have a reputation across the industry for doing the right things for the right reason, who are doing all the right accreditations, who are putting themselves forward for all the awards, whose websites talk about all the wonderful things they do for the communities, what have you. CLOCS is an easy sell for them because they're going to go, well, of course we should do this, because they want to show off a little bit. And if you get that mass started and get people to procuring for it and creating that environment, it tends to then just naturally follow up, which is where we're kind of at that point there now. It feels like we're starting to get more demand and more buy-in from people.
What question do you want to ask, Michael? Then I'll probably just close out with the one from Kim, and we might have to call it quits, I think.
Yeah, sure. I'll go through the list. Actually, just on that, Andy, thanks for sharing that. I really agree with you on the point about local government and councils as well. They obviously have a lot of building developments going on in their own patch, and the benefit to them is obviously reducing road trauma that's happening on their own network, the congestion and the emissions from logistics. Yep.
That's one of our priorities, yeah.
And also other trade bodies. So again, what was critical for CLOCS was partnering with CCS and Build UK. Now, CCS provide monitoring services, and Build UK do nothing for CLOCS. They barely even turn up to meetings, which is fine. But they have credibility and have audience. So having their name attached to it, you know, when somebody looks at CLOCS and goes, okay, well, what is this CLOCS thing? And they can see all the CLOCS partners, which is Build UK, which is, you know, all these big established organizations who have our own insight. Again, it gives us that credibility and gives us that thing of, oh, okay, this is proper. This is, you know, these organizations are buying into it and supporting it. And all we need for that is aligned aims and objectives. And really, that's any organization who's trying to make the industry a better place, a safer place, a better place to work. You know, so really, partners can kind of be anybody, really, to a degree. But by getting those partners buy-in, and that buy-in simple, it's like, we just want you to support us. We just want you to kind of go, yeah, they're a good thing, and they're doing a good thing. That's it. Again, just gives that credibility from a standing start, if that makes sense, and access to audience as well.
Great. I might ask, just another question, Jerome, just quickly. So, Andy, do you feel that CLOCS has reduced red tape for industry? Has it given confidence to contractors that those are CLOCS accredited meet all requirements? So they might, if they're accredited to CLOCS, they would be complying with their legal duties as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of this, of course, is borne by legislation and health and safety requirements, what have you, of course. So it does give that confidence. Again, back up that sort of chain of influence, if you like, of if somebody's got an awareness of CLOCS, if somebody's a CLOCS champion, if somebody's working to the CLOCS standard, it does. We are at that stage now where that instills a sense of confidence about what that badge means, and that takes a while because, you know, when you start with a lovely badge, people going, well, it sounds good, it's lots of words and it's very pretty and what have you, and that there's often no shortcut to that. It's time and familiarity and getting people to come to the meetings, understand and talk about what have you. So yes, there is now, I think, you know, let's say HS2 is a huge infrastructure project in the UK. Been going on for years. We work with them very collaboratively. We work with them to deliver CLP training, develop resources. They were never a CLOCS champion. And I couldn't believe that when I joined and something cropped up and I said, oh, I'm looking on the website, I can't see HS2 listed. And somebody said, oh no, they never have. It's politics, internal politics, somebody somewhere. And then that person left HS2 and the new head of logistics came in, who was previously at one of our other CLOCS champions, Battersea Power Station. And I contacted him and said, look, HS2 are not a champion. He was like, this is ridiculous. Of course it should be a champion, because he's very much a supporter of all of these accreditations, things like FORS, Van Excellence, what have you. He sees a value in them. He goes, look, you know, it does have a value because it creates that culture of standards, and it puts it in a very nice, tangible way that people can relate to and talk about it. And it's again, it's not an HS2 standard; it's an industry standard. And he's a big supporter of these. So he was like, we're going to get signed up. We're not just going to sign up. We're going to shout about we're signed up. I'm going to talk about this. We're going to do some stuff on social media. We're going to talk about why we've signed up to CLOCS, because we do believe that it's got this value through the supply chain and working to a common standard and a culture of collaboration, what have you. So, you know, you do get those key people who understand the value of it. And as I say, our hope is the next sort of shift for that, I think, will be this reward and recognition thing. I think that will help us really step up a level in not just levels of performance, but recognizing and quantifying that performance in a tangible way that other people can look at and go, right, I understand what that means, and therefore getting back to this, creating that commercial advantage. We knew from our days at CCS, people asked us the same question about value. We knew people would win and lose big contracts, you know, multi-million-pound contracts on whether they were, how many awards they'd won last year with CCS. We knew people, site managers got jobs based on being a gold winner last year, because it just had that, it developed that general understanding of its value and what that means. So if I was a if I was a site manager who'd won 3 or 4 gold awards over the previous years, people knew what that meant. It was quite hard to quantify with data what that meant, but people knew what it was about: attitude and standards and delivery and competence and all those different things, and creating that culture. And I think CLOCS is getting to that same stage as well.
It's great that those things are being taken into account as opposed to just, cost. So
yeah.
Good question here from Kim. And he was just asking you, CLOCS auditors, do they exist, and what is the cost, and how often does an audit take place?
So we don't have any auditors. We use the CCS auditors, and we've sort of reviewed that recently. Very happy to commit to continuing to do that because they have that infrastructure. So CCS has, when I left 18 months ago, thereabouts, it had about 100 CLOCS monitors scattered across the UK. Now those those CCS monitors are self-employed consultants, people who are usually coming towards the end of their careers, but we want that deliberately because it's people who've had a lot of experience working in construction sites, who have that wisdom, I'll say that carefully, but that wisdom experience that they can go from site to site and relate and understand. So they're all self-employed and they get paid a fee by CCS to go and do a visit. So what we do is we charge a contractor, and we'll forget about people who aren't either registered with CCS. That's slightly more expensive because we have to put somebody in a car to go to visit that site. But if it's a CCS site, we the monitor jumps in his car, goes along, as I say, does a CCS audit that lasts perhaps an hour and a half, and then does an extra 45 minutes at the end. We charge £250 for an audit. They get a report back, a 2-page report that has the 11 sections of the standard scored. We do 0 is no evidence of compliance, 1 is you're there but you're not there quite, and 2 is compliance, and 3 is above and beyond. Don't quite like it, we're going to change it, but that's what it is at the moment. You come out with a score out of 33 because we've got 11 sections, something ridiculous, and that's it. It's kind of at the moment you get a score, that's it. There's no wow 33, wow you've done really well, it's just 33 or 6, so that is good. At the moment, the process is that they fill in a self-assessment sheet and literally email that across to CCS, and the monitor looks at it and goes along, goes, right, you've told me you're doing this. Yeah, I can see you are doing this, and what have you. So again, even today, it is still a validation exercise rather than a full audit. We very deliberately don't use the word audit or inspection because we don't feel that's who we are. We're not a regulator. We don't have enforcement powers. We would rather work for people on a collaborative basis and a consultative basis to give advice. We don't want, again, we know this from our CCS days, that if you go in as an auditor and inspector, people are on guard from day one. They'll hide things they don't want you to see, or they'll perhaps, embellish the truth. Whereas our approach at CCS was always like, we're not here to catch you out. We're here to help you get better. And often, again, the anecdotes at CCS, you turn up to site and the paint would be wet on the hoarding. The toilets had been miraculously cleaned, and everybody was in the best behavior. And of course, they'd just upped their game. But it was like, okay, that's playing the game. But at least the hoardings have been painted, and that's great because they would have been painted if we hadn't come along. And at least you have to clean the toilets. But again, the monitors were quite canny at understanding and going, okay. And then we'd go and speak to a few of the operatives over a cup of coffee and kind of go, well, what's it like generally? And So yes, it encouraged the right behaviors, and I say it was done on a very consultative basis rather, and Mons could give the site the benefit of the doubt. So if they'd forgotten to put up a simple thing like putting up their CCS posters and banners, if they'd forgotten to do it, they could score them down. But more often they just say, get them up, just go and put them up, And CLOCS has done on a similar basis of trying to encourage and recognise performance. And if somebody's not doing well, we don't talk about non-compliance, we don't talk about failure. We just talk about, like, here's an area for development or an area for improvement or something like that.
Awesome, it's fantastic. Michael, any more, or should we call that quits, you reckon? Because we're still running over now.
Yeah,
there's so much more I could ask.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot more that I could ask as well, but I think we've got sort of the main questions out, and I'm pretty happy with that. So,
and we've always said, guys, we're happy to help you on this journey and provide whatever guidance, support, or do this again at some point when different questions will have risen up and what have you. So we're always here. So not a problem at all.
Andy, thank you so much. Thank you guys who are called in and joined this evening. I know it's a big call, but above and beyond. But it's been absolutely every time we catch up, I listen and I learn, and I think it's and it's one of the best ways to go about doing it the way we're doing it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, have a good evening, everybody.
Oh, well, thank you,
Andy.
Michael.
Thanks so much for your time, Andy. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. See you guys. See everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.